Those are the only moments when attention is guaranteed and it's given to us by default, and we really should not waste those.
Meet Ioana Jongsma, who has been helping speakers find their words since 2008. She has worked with over 400 leaders, experts, founders, and policymakers of 46 different nationalities.
I see the people staring at me, I see the big lights on stage, the microphone, and I react with this stress/fear/anxiety response, but rather it's my body preparing, anticipating it will have to rise up to a challenge.
In today's episode, we dive into the neuroscience behind the fear of public speaking, how to leverage that for your own benefit before stepping on stage. We talk about the fact that public speaking is a skill, not a talent, and yes, you can learn it. Plus, we dive into the TEDx topic and what someone like Ioana is looking for in those that apply to be on the red dot.
I will not put my name on a talk prepared in 3 weeks.
To date, Ioana has supported 24 TEDx speakers to deliver the talk of their lives on TEDx stages across Europe, India, and the US. Ioana is an ICF Associated Certified Coach, a Gestalt Professional Certified Coach, and a Neuro-Mindfulness Master Practitioner.
This is where a lot of speeches, presentations, and pitches go wrong, is speakers trying to...
If you are serious about public speaking and building authority, it's one of those episodes that you don't want to miss, and you have to take notes in order to start applying right away after you listen. Enjoy the episode, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment with your perspective. Enjoy. Ioana, welcome to Authority in the Wild.
Great to be with you, Gabe, and hi, everyone.
You identify yourself as an introvert. And I would say that most introverts will rather die than standing on stage. But look at you, you don't just survive that, you basically build a career on it. Is your methodology actually better suited for introverts because you have to rely on structure and biology rather than, the sheer energy that extroverts have, or works for everyone?
Interesting framing. I really hadn't thought about it that way. My approach to it has been to democratize public speaking, to give tools that everybody can use, and to free all of us a little bit from the story that public speaking is only for the talented few, which I personally don't believe in. But I suppose there's some truth to what you're saying, because introverts and maybe people who need to think in a more structured way do have a specific appetite for having tools and frameworks and things like that. But I will say that every client that I work with, whether they identify as an introvert or not, has at some point said things along the lines of, I'm uncomfortable on stage. Being in high stakes meetings comes with a lot of pressure, and I don't perform so well as I do in regular situations. I'm doing this big pitch, and I'm worried that I might not come across as authoritative as I would like, or I might not connect the way that I would like with my investors. So there is some level of challenge for everyone, not just for introverts. But I do have a soft spot for them, so yes.
You consider yourself one of them, right? And
Absolutely.
for years, I did that as well. Like, I consider myself an introvert, and it kind of showed off in certain situations. But what's interesting, one word that you mentioned there, skill. Like, is public speaking a skill that can be learned by anyone?
Yes.
Why?
Yes, definitely. Because none of us actually are born knowing how to do it. Even people who are talented, quote unquote, they learn from their own experience. Even if they haven't taken a course, or, they haven't done a consulting program or a coaching program, they've learned from their own experience. They've seen what works, what doesn't work. When do people laugh? When do people lean in from their seats? When do they pull out their phones? All of those things are prime material for us to learn from. So, yes, it's a skill that everybody, absolutely everybody can learn.
And still, so many people run away from it, right? And I did as well. And I can share small experience which might work maybe as a starting point for our conversation. I was in a situation in which I was invited to host a small presentation in a co-working space. And I was expected to be in front of 10, 12 individuals. There were more than 100 people attending, and I had no idea. So even that was in my native language, our native language of Romanian, I literally destroyed the Romanian language in the first 5 minutes. And my anxiety was at all-time high. I was literally shaking. Even that wasn't a quote-unquote stage there. It was literally, how I call it, projector on a wall. And I was literally sitting and like like someone was prepared to shoot at me. I was sitting with my back at the wall, and after 5 minutes I was decent, but from that moment on it took me years to be able to be again in that situation.
Yeah.
Any of your students and clients that you work with come and say similar stories, or
All the time, myself included. So I spent my first 6 months, ironically, teaching communication skills, hoping that my class would be canceled every single day. I had trouble keeping my breakfast down. I was nauseous every morning, the sweats, the shakes, everything you just talked about. So I hear this a lot from my clients to different levels, right? There are people who have full on stage fright, so proper freeze moments that are even worse than what you and I have experienced, and people who, just have a little bit of butterflies in their stomach, but at the end of the day, that just energizes them to speak. So everything on that spectrum. And what that does is just absolutely normal for us to feel that way. It's our body doing what it does best, reacting in a way that it thinks is good for us in the moment, right? In a moment of high pressure, it's important for us to be ready for a challenge. It's not important for us to remember words, to make connections, to think on our feet, all of these things that require, thinking and analysis and proper use of language. Those things are not the priority for a moment when the body thinks it needs to rise up to maybe a life and death challenge, right? That's how stress is interpreted. So, really, we should be grateful for all the butterflies in our stomach, for all the sweating, for the heart pumping in our chest, because that's our body doing its work.
that's interesting, right? Like how obviously our brain maybe didn't evolve as fast as we want. And we are not in savannas anymore trying to run away from a lion and
And the audience doesn't suddenly jump out and hunt us from the seats.
yeah, exactly. And still, we are there like fighting for our life, at least from the perspective of our brain. And I'm a big fan of a podcast that you are part of, Mind Architect, back in our home country, Romania. And I know that you are not just a coach, you're more than that. And you're specialized into neuroscience as well. And I'd like to talk a bit more about how our brain work in those type of situation in order to better understand how we can leverage that into basically our own advantage when you're on the stage and in those high pressure moments.
Right. So, what we just talked about, this stress response, as it's known, is something that I think has been written about in the last few years all over the internet. And people have gotten to know a little bit about this idea of having a fight, flight, freeze reaction, where fight is our response of being a little bit aggressive, of leaning into a challenge, right? Flight is where we want to be very quickly over and done with it. Like if you're speaking very quickly because you want to be really quickly as possible off the stage, that's a flight type of reaction, right? You want to run away and remove yourself, be away from that dangerous situation. And the fight thing is like kind of attacking it as a challenge and being really loud and aggressive and going into that a little bit argumentative mode. Maybe I see that sometimes in speakers during Q&A moments. If they're a little bit stressed, they become a little bit combative when they get questions from the audience. And then there's the phrase, which obviously is every speaker's worst nightmare, when we have that difficulty in accessing our ideas. Our words don't come so easily, even in our native language. Sometimes we can't find the right words for things. And it's not because we haven't prepared, it's not because we don't know our stuff. It's just because in that moment, that's not our brain's priority. Our brain's priority is to keep us safe. And that sometimes means playing dead, which is the extreme version of freeze, right? So that's one way to look at it. And it's a story, a model that has been very successful because it's clear. It provides like 3 clear reactions, 3 strategies that people can do to, manage these responses. But the story that I've come to appreciate more in the last 2 years is a model that's shared by Lisa Feldman Barrett, a Canadian neuroscientist who actually has brought this perspective of the brain and body together rising up for a challenge. So it's where stress is not a reaction to something that happens. So I'm in this situation. I see the people staring at me. I see the big lights on stage, the microphone, and I react with this stress/fear/anxiety response. But rather, it's my body preparing, anticipating it will have to rise up to a challenge. So then it mobilizes all of these resources internally, like heart rate. That's why the heart starts pumping faster, sending blood and oxygen to the muscles to be ready to act, right? So getting into this preparation mode for something that the brain expects will be very effortful, very difficult. So because it's difficult, we need a lot of internal resources for it. So in this model, stress is not a reaction, it's a prediction.
So how we can use that in our advantage? When that moment kicks in, I'm in a backstage, I'm prepared to walk on the stage, and my heart is racing like crazy. And obviously, before talking to you, I was thinking like, oh, my biology is working against me. But while reframing like that, I can literally work that into my advantage. What do I do then?
Right. So there are 2 levers that I would look at. One is if my body's preparing for a big effort, just to question that. Is this effort really so great? Do I really need all this energy that's mobilizing inside of me through the increased heart rate, through this blood and glucose and oxygen that's sent to the muscles? Am I really going to have to make this effort? That's one thing to do. The other lever would be to see this prediction and again wonder, what do I really need to meet this challenge? So, is the challenge that great? Yes, no, maybe, right? So, to try to calibrate. And what are the resources that I really need to meet this challenge? How do I really need to prepare? Do I really need to be in a state of physical alertness? Or would I be better prepared by doing some other things. So this is a little bit of top-down control, right? A check-in with reality. That's a first step.
To make sure I understand this first step, so obviously, in theory at least, we have control. In practice, sometimes our brain is taking over. And as the anecdote that the host of Mind Architect is saying regarding the elephant and the rider, the elephant, basically our amygdala, if I'm not wrong, it's taking over. And we are not really in control back then. But still, we can have control, right?
Yeah. So if stress is a prediction, predictions are made based on what we believe about the world, right? So this reality check, and based on prior experience. So if we teach the elephant, quote unquote, that this type of experience is safe, it can lead to neutral or positive results, then it can begin to use these experiences as a basis for a future prediction that says it's going to be okay. So, if we can begin to put ourselves in low stakes situations where we can do a little presentation where people are really supportive of us, they give us good feedback, we get maybe some appreciation from our colleagues, or maybe we go to, I don't know, a Toastmasters event or a stand-up night, and we just tell a joke to a room full of strangers that are never going to see us ever again. And some people cheer, some people maybe ignore us. Maybe we get booed on stage, but still, nothing bad happens to us. We see that is survivable, it's fine. Then we can use that as a stepping stone for the next experience, where we can say, okay, I've done that before. I know how this goes. It's not so bad. I can up the stakes a little bit. And again and again and again.
It's interesting that I basically use that now all the time, either in these interviews or in situation in which I host a workshop, either live or online. I tell myself before joining that, oh, it's easy. This I've done so many times before. But obviously at the beginning wasn't the case. But it's interesting how with this repetition that we go through, like anything quote unquote hard in life gets so much easier with time. And because our brain is so easy to train, and I won't say trick, but I think train is the right word, to be accustomed to the fact that you're not gonna die if you're speaking in front of an audience, or even if you mess it up and so on. But still, I have a recent example. Last week, no, actually it was this week. Oh my God, time flies. We start here in the place that I live to gather together a couple of friends to host a presentation about a random topic that we personally choose. And for me, it was the first time doing that. And everything went smooth according to me. And I asked for feedback. Feedback coming from people that were like just friends and so on was good in my terms, right? And still, I wanted to hear some advice, some things that I can improve. And then comes my wife and shares exactly that. Her perspective seen from the lens of someone that knows me very well. And I'm like trying to justify myself why I did things in a certain way. And I'm like, after that, why I become so defensive? What
Right.
happened there?
What do you think happened there?
I
If
was,
I was to put my coach hat on.
I think I was trying to protect myself somehow
Mhm.
from a potential perspective in which I fail in a way, instead of taking that as a constructive feedback, which literally was, and I could see from that lens. Not sure what else.
I would guess that your wife's opinion and the way that she looks at you matter to you very much.
True.
So that, of course, ups the stakes for you a little bit compared to all the other people in the room. She was probably the most significant.
exactly that. And now it's so obvious, right? Now it's so obvious because I was thinking like, and there's another thing, like every single time and I talked with a lot of people that had a chance to speak in front of people, and they say, not sure, please correct me if I'm wrong. Like every single time when you have familiar faces in the crowd, somehow it's easier because you can also make eye contact with them and you're familiar, you're not getting that nervous. But in the same time, sometimes, like in this situation, the stakes are higher and you feel the need to deliver at a different level.
You need to impress the people that have an important role in your life. And I know that people very often look for friends or colleagues in the audience, and that's great. I think we can get a lot of support from people like that. I, for one, get more nervous when I have really important people for me, important for me personally. So I'm not talking VIPs or famous people or anything of the sort, just people who are important for me in my life. I get more nervous when they're in the room, particularly if they're close friends, family, my husband, or significant peers, because I feel like I have to over deliver even more than I would normally try for them in a way. So I think there needs to be a balanced level of closeness in terms of those people that we want in the room for support. Because sometimes, like you have shared, and it's definitely my case, and I've heard it from clients as well, if these people are too important to us, they'll just add to the pressure. So, yeah, that's something I definitely relate to.
So probably we should not invite our most important talk, our closest friends or people important in our lives.
I think we can if we know for sure that those people are a source of support for us. I am very honest to the people in my family, and I tell them, I love you. I love that you want to support me, but I'm just going to be more nervous. Can you be there in the coffee break after my thing? And obviously, everybody is like, no, but we want to see you. We want to be there when you're speaking and see you live. I'm sorry, you can't. When the stakes are really high. So, obviously, not for everything, but when it's a really high pressure thing, that is something that I have learned that I have to do to manage the environment and reduce the number of stressors.
That's interesting. And speaking of, like, because this is a good advice, but I'd like to hear what's the worst advice that you hear when it comes to
That,
speakers.
that's easy. Be yourself. Just be yourself. That's like the worst advice anyone can ever get.
But if I wouldn't be myself, like, who should I be?
Who else can you be? Exactly. That's exactly the point. It's completely useless advice. And I get where it comes from. People are very well meaning. They mean to reassure and to calm down the person who is nervous because they're about to speak. And the message is you don't need to do anything extra special, but it also doesn't help. Because in that moment, when somebody needs advice and is looking for advice, they actually need to hear something that they can do.
Like what?
So, for example, things like go for a short walk before your talk. That's something really helpful. It helps you release some of that nervous energy. It helps you get more oxygen into your blood and therefore your brain so you can actually think better in that stressful moment. That's one thing. Something else that people can do is to do a little bit of breathing practice. And here, I really don't mean take a deep breath. That is not a good idea. It will make you more nervous. If you just breathe in very deeply, you should focus on the exhale, on breathing out. So, That's something else that people can do for 2, 3, 5 minutes before a talk. They should definitely not be practicing their script if they have one. That is not the time to do that. But they could be maybe listening to a bit of music and jumping up and down a little bit to the beat behind the stage or backstage as they're ready, mic'd up, ready to go, just to kind of get into that, that high spirits mood. And again, to release nervous energy through the movement. So small things like that.
And there's a common theme there, right? The movement parts,
Hmm.
even when you breathe. Like
Absolutely.
it's fascinating how easy we can change our state just by exercising, and it doesn't have to be like hitting the gym right before you speak or like running
I
on
mean,
my.
some people like to drop and do 10 push-ups, whatever gets you going.
And maybe that's the secret of those individuals that literally run on stage when they are starting to speak.
Yes. Yes. What happens there, though, is they have so much energy that they're not channeling with purpose, that they just end up going, up and down the stage. And you can see the energy and does get people energized up to a point. But if it lasts too long, it can make people tired. Because how long can you follow somebody who's just going, up and down the stage for 3 minutes, 5 minutes? I would say definitely not 10. I would get tired watching somebody do that for 10 whole minutes. Most keynotes and presentations last longer than that. So it needs to be purposeful. But yes, movement is something that can really help a speaker in the moment as well. We were talking about that freeze moment a little bit earlier. And actually, by shifting your body's position, you can also shift out of a freeze moment. So just taking a step to the left, to the right, making a big gesture is a way to kind of unfreeze your yourself physically and therefore also mentally.
And I have a specific question regarding that, especially because when it comes to speaking, there are so many mediums. We have the stage, we have an in-person workshops, and you probably move through the tables, or a live workshops, or a podcast, or a Zoom call, or you're recording a reel for TikTok or Instagram or a YouTube video. There are specific things we can do or we should not do when it comes to our hands, our body, based on the medium, or we have just to be ourselves.
The key word here for me is purposeful, choiceful. So, whatever we do with our voice, with our body, with our words, needs to be choiceful. If we just leave all of that to whatever comes in the moment, we might not be sending the same message through the different ways we communicate, right? Verbally, non-verbally. So if people watch themselves, right? So they make a recording and then watch themselves, they would have to see the same story being told through their words, through their body language, through the tone of their voice, through their presence overall. So that's the strategic approach. I don't like to rely on techniques and, specific exercises or things like that because they don't apply to everyone and they address the symptoms and not the cause, right? Of any potential, I don't know, if there's maybe chaos in a person's movements or if they're too still or whatever's happening for them. Learning techniques won't solve that. It will just add to the pressure on the speaker. It will just be one extra thing that they're trying to think about while they're also trying to remember their lines and to see what the audience is doing or reacting or not reacting. And oh, yes, I forgot to do this with my hand and I forgot to pause here. So it will just add to the pressure.
And there are moments when we should integrate that, maybe when we are, I don't know, more comfortable, either on stage or on camera, or we should try to avoid as much as possible if doesn't, as you mentioned, necessarily add to the message or support the message in some way.
I see a lot of speakers who feel like they need to play a certain character, a certain role when they're in front of a camera, whether that's in a face-to-face situation, right, in a room, or on a reel or on a podcast. But what this is where the be yourself comes in. Trying to be someone else is also not helpful. So once you're a little bit more aware of what you look like, what you sound like, and the only way to do that is through recordings and watching yourself and learning from seeing yourself do these things in real situations. Once you get a bit more familiar with that, you can also begin to fine tune and work in a direction that you want. So, if, for example, you're someone who believes in playfulness and has a value for warmth and friendship, and you're on a podcast going through, I don't know, step by step frameworks, well, that doesn't sound very playful. You're not very aligned with your personal values, right? But sometimes we're not aware of that unless we see it and hear it, right, on actual real material. Or the opposite, if you're someone who really values accuracy and excellence, but you're going on for 10 minutes and going through many sidetracks, that is also not aligned. And we need to get all of those things, maybe just lay them out and see, okay, this is the kind of person that I would like to be, that I would like to sound like, that I would like to look like. What does someone who values playfulness sound like? What does their voice do? What does their body do? What do they dress like? Right? What does somebody who values accuracy look and sound like? So once you can name some of these priorities for yourself, you can begin to also look at how you're displaying them, embodying them.
That's wonderful advice, because often we just try to quote unquote copy those that are maybe successful in our field, or they are where we want to arrive, but their values might not be aligned with ours, or their way of behaving, it's totally different person that we can ever be. And it's interesting, like when for example, when I started this podcast, at the beginning I was trying to replicate some more of the greatest interviewers out there, and trying basically to be someone else, and obviously that didn't work. So I was trying to reverse engineer from there in a similar way that as you described, but of course not as detailed, and that worked for me. But often what I hear and see is people that they know that we're living in an era in which there must be it's easier to build authority if you're on camera or speaking and so on, and they have no idea where to begin. And what you just share, I think it's an absolutely fantastic starting point. And some of them, they arrive on the next step, in which they want to step on that big red dot from TEDx. And I know that you haven't just coached speakers, you create them for TEDx audience women. And as a gatekeeper, like when you're looking at, I don't know, 100 applications, let's say, what's that one subtle signal that tells you that this person is an authority versus this person is just an expert without a clear idea?
I love that question. What we very often looked at was, is this person somebody who wants to have a TED Talk or a TEDx talk? Or is this person somebody who really should share their work, their findings? And maybe they're even too busy to be doing what they're doing to consider speaking at a TEDx event. So people who self-nominate usually get a little red flag, in Europe at least. I know that in the US, that's a little different. But for European events, and definitely for ours in Odense when I was still on the curating team, that was something that we thought about. If someone else nominates you, like a colleague or a friend who advocates for your work and thinks, this person, you really have to hear this person, then we were more likely to consider them as a candidate. Obviously, sometimes people with a really high level of expertise would nominate themselves, and we would, of course, look at all the applications. But statistically, people who nominated themselves were the more motivational type of speakers who didn't have a research background, they didn't have something new to share. It was mostly, rah rah rah, you can do this. If this is how I did it, this is how you can do it too, which is not what TED and TEDx are all about. So that's one thing. And secondly, we looked actively for people who were not even on the application form, but were people who were appreciated in the community, who were beginning to make themselves known in other circles, and who hadn't even considered that they might do a TEDx talk. So we would actively approach them and present the idea and invite them to apply. So the key there is do something cool, do something new, do your own original work. And that is the number one thing that a TEDx organizer will look for.
On that note, like when I'm thinking about it and judging by the best TED Talks that I've seen, I feel it's so interesting that some of them, they are clearly standing out because they have a unique idea or a unique perspective looking at a certain thing. But some of them truly feel like I feel nothing by listening to this. I learn nothing. It's just, as you mentioned, like a motivational thing, or it's something that, I don't know, anyone can say. And I feel like a lot of people will think like, all right, so maybe one of my goals or to be there on the red dot. And they were like, what I'm doing is not that unique, is not that groundbreaking. They have a chance still? Or what they should do in order to maybe, I don't know, insert some life into their work?
Okay, so there are two questions that I would ask someone in that position. I would try to explore what their motivation is for wanting to do this kind of talk, because the red dot is not the only way to build authority. There are industry conferences, there's corporate speaking, there are podcasts, there are so many other environments that can lead to that authority building. You don't necessarily have to do it from the red dot. Yes, it's true that it provides a sort of a seal of approval, but that's for a very general audience. And unless you have a talk that will really spread, a general audience might not even be the audience you should be reaching. For a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, they want to be reaching investors or maybe others working in their industry. So then more focused events are the way to go. So that's where the motivation piece comes in, because some of these speakers will have something that they really want to share with the whole world. If it's, I work with founders in climate tech, in mental health, in areas where they really feel like everybody should know about this thing. And yes, it's great for business, but it's also something that people could apply in their everyday life, whether they're an expert or not. And in that case, then yes, you should do your best and apply and try to get on the red dot. But if your goal is just to build your business, then more targeted environments are a much better way, a more effective way to do that and to get authority. And next to the motivation piece is also a question around what level of effort are you willing to make? Because a TEDx journey can take anything from a few months, 2 to 3 months, to over a year. So, as you know, I work with Brian Miller and Francisco Mahfouz under Clarity Up, and we do a lot of work with people who speak on the red dot. And that's one of the questions that we ask to figure out if that person is a good client for us. Because if they're not aware the level of effort that it takes, and if they're not willing to go on this long journey, they're not someone that we want to work with. I do get requests from people who say, I've already been booked. I have a TEDx talk in 3 weeks. Can you help me? And the answer is, I'm sure you're going to do great, but no, I cannot help you. I will not put my name on a talk prepared in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's such an underrated effort to do such a talk, and is often, I think, if someone has nothing in common with this type of talks, they are so short, and you just cannot do what you do, for example, on a podcast where you have maybe 1 hour or longer than that to share your ideas, and it's a back and forth if it's an interview, or even if it's a solo episode, you have more control, more freedom. And for those that are listening and I don't know, they fancy this idea and maybe are in that situation, their talk is like in 6 months, 8 months. Apart,
That's a much better scenario. Yes.
and obviously, the recommending thing will be to appeal to experts to get help for that, like you guys. And still, what they should prepare before that, like it is something they should consider before asking help.
So the first thing they need to consider is who do they want to reach? Even a TEDx talk that goes on a YouTube channel with probably hundreds of thousands, millions of subscribers is not for everyone. And that's one of the first things that we also address with our clients. And this is the number one question that any speaker should be asking wherever they're speaking, really, whether it's on the red dot, whether it's in a room of 5 people. Who are those people? Who do I really want to reach? Is it investors? Is it mothers of more than one child? Is it entrepreneurs who used to be in corporate but now are setting off for themselves? Whatever their target audience is, know really, really clearly who you want to talk to. That's the first question this is the first question that I asked you when you invited me to come on this podcast. Who are your listeners? Right? It's the most important thing we need to know, because if we know who we're talking to, we have a much better chance of speaking their language. This is where a lot of speeches go wrong, a lot of presentations and pitches go wrong, is speakers trying to say everything for everyone, right? Mothers who have more than one kid would not be interested in the same things as entrepreneurs who are leaving their corporate job, right? They're very different groups of people. We can't say everything for everyone. So we need to pick a lane and stick there for those 10, 12 minutes that we're talking, right? In pitching, it could be even 3 minutes. If we have more to share, that's great. That's another lane for another talk, right? Or for a panel conversation, or for a workshop, or whatever other services we might be offering, or formats we might to play with, podcasts, reels, whatever.
It's still something that somehow bothers me, the fact that as a consultant, I see a lot of people avoiding this part in which they truly understand who they serve, in front of what people they should be present. And it's the unsexy part of business and marketing, but without it, it's almost impossible to truly be able to help someone. And I think if you do this groundwork and you have a strong foundation and understanding, not just who they are, like, I don't know, titles or where they spend the time and so on, but truly understand them, like, what do you think about it when they are alone? Like, what are they afraid about? What they truly believe and want? Not just, I don't know, I want to grow my business. I want to, I don't know, build authority and all that stuff, but truly, like, what motivates them?
What are you gonna do with that authority? What are you gonna do once you've built up your business, once you've reached your financial goals, whatever they may be? What are you gonna do with that, right? That's the bottom line. And I find it interesting that you call it the unsexy part of business. Because to me, double clicking on these profiles is one of the most exciting things that I can possibly do. Like, profile an audience and really understand them. And maybe I'm just a voyeur, but it's one of the things that gets me super energized, understanding the person who is in front of me, right? In that audience persona. What I think gets in the way for a lot of our clients is the fear of missing out. It's difficult to niche down because what if there's this other little group that might also benefit from something that I do and they won't get to hear it if I don't address everybody? I think that plays in for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And you've seen this in
Yeah,
your clients
Sweden,
too.
I was there as well. Like, I was afraid to say no to certain projects because I was like, oh, if the next one is not coming, but obviously it will come. And yeah, it's a common thing, and it's somehow normal, especially when you don't have enough, let's say, belief in your strengths and in your capability of like being able to get the next yes or get the next gig or whatever you're doing. And the reality is that it's possible, and we should chase those no's. We should chase those moments in which you have the opportunity to do better as well.
What I've seen happens in practice is that the clearer your niche is, the more success you have, the more yeses you get. And yeah, you get some no's as well, but they're clearer and they're guidance rather than, okay, I don't really know what to do with this. And I get a lot of questions like, hey, I know that you usually work with founders and researchers and C-level folks, but do you by any chance also do group workshops? Like, it's not, it doesn't actually exclude other work. It just helps people know where to start in talking to you. So, if anything, niching down is actually really good for business.
Yeah, cannot agree more. And even that it's in theory hard. And yeah, why I use the word unsexy, because everyone, if you look online, all the gurus are promoting basically what looks good, like a number of leads, number of followers, vanity metrics, yeah, build that website, build that thing. And I come from that world in which like I was promoting these visual things and not the actual results that these things are bringing. Or yeah, I learned it the hard way, at least myself. And I hope those listening or watching can take this as well from our talk. The fact that whenever you have the chance to narrow down further, you're in a position of power, because you'll be able to charge more. You'll be able to not compete on price and actually charge premium pricing and so on. And going back a bit on stage for a second, like, can you take me back to a moment in which you literally feel like I screwed up? But this moment is it's not at the beginning. It's, you were already an expert, but you are on stage and you have that, let's say, flop moment.
Yeah, Brian Francisco and I actually just recorded a podcast on that. We shared our biggest flops,
Oh, I
and
need to listen to that.
you have to hear that. It's really fun. So I offended my client from the stage,
Oh my god.
and yeah, it's definitely a lesson I'll never forget. It's about, I want to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where obviously I've been doing this for a while, and it was in a corporate setup. It was a client that I was really happy to have, a new client that I was hoping to build a relationship with. So, on the topic of really knowing your audience, I did my research, but I didn't go deep enough. Because what I told them basically was that all their expertise amounted to about 50% of their success. So they might as well, go home because what they should be doing is something completely different. I was sharing these study results around executive presence and how much it actually contributes to success in the workplace. And this was a group of folks in IT and tech. So they were all really senior experts with heavy technical backgrounds who, had been doing fantastic work for their organization. And there I was telling them that it actually doesn't amount to more than 15% of their future promotion opportunities. And they should be looking at executive presence instead. So, of course, there was value in those numbers, but the framing could have been done a lot better. I did notice there was a shift in the energy in the room. Everybody kind of went a little quiet. They went a little bit, back in their seats, leaning a little bit back. And I wasn't quite sure what happened until I had the debrief conversation with the learning and development manager who had hired me. So that was a lesson well learned.
I admire you for sharing this because often experts are afraid to share these vulnerable moments. But
Mm.
at least in my opinion, these are the moments that actually make us humans. And it's
And a total growth moment for me, honestly. I mean, without that, I might still be making that mistake today. So I'm also grateful that I got this candid feedback. It's helped me tremendously.
yeah, I bet. And often those are the best lessons of our lives. Yeah, when we hear that. And speaking of working with clients, like if someone is listening, how will they identify themselves to raise their hand and say like, Ioana, you are the one that I want to work with?
People usually come to me when they're in a moment of change, specifically when the stakes suddenly get higher. So if people listening or watching are finding themselves in that moment in their lives and they feel like, I used to be really good at this, but now the game has changed and I'm not getting the same success rate that I used to get. I'm not feeling as powerful as I used to feel in these moments. I'm not getting the response that I was hoping for. That's when they usually come in and they say, okay, I need to do something. I don't really know where to start. Can you help? So, yeah, I'd be happy to hear from anyone who's out there listening and thinking, yes, that's me right now.
Of course, you hear that. And Ioana's
Mm.
website will be on the screen right now and down in the show notes. So make sure to check her work out and get in touch because you're a match, judging by what she shared.
Thank you for that, Gabe. Really appreciate it.
Well deserved. And I have to ask, you wrote your master thesis on Star Trek. I think that's the ultimate
I
nerd
had this
authority flex.
coming.
But yeah, is there a communication lesson from the Federation or Captain Picard that actually holds up in the boardroom or, I don't know, on a Danish pharmaceutical company today?
um, Let me think about that. Wow, Captain Picard is not the one I would go to. My favorite character in the series is actually Captain Sisko, and I think he's a little less famous than Captain Picard is. But the reason I like him better is because he's a lot less pretentious than Captain Picard. So, Sisko is the captain of a space station in the series called Deep Space Nine. And on his space station, all of these alien races come and go to refuel, to take a break while they're on their journey. And of course, it's one of these border territories of the Federation. So there are all sorts of diplomatic troubles, even armed conflict, and sometimes just funny, quirky incidents. And he always solves things by taking a little bit of time before reacting. So, if anything, I would definitely recommend that people take a bit of time before reacting. If they're particularly in a Q&A situation or if something unexpected happens in the room, just take one breath before you jump to conclusions or before you respond. That would be my Star Trek communication lesson.
And that's a wonderful one because often it only takes, right? A small break, a small
Just a breath.
breath.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
so
You
powerful.
you never know what the reality is for the other person. That's where this comes from. You never know what cultural norms they might have, what has been happening for them that day, what expectations they came with for whatever event you're at. So before you think they're being an asshole, pardon my French, take a break and see if you can explore, if you can get curious around what's happening for the other person.
And folks, that comes from someone that work with individuals in more than 40 type of or
Nationalities. So
nationalities.
I'm not sure actually if it's also 47 countries, but yeah, I've worked with clients of 47 nationalities so far. Yeah.
Wow, that's what I call global approach. And we live in a world in which basically having this global perspective helps a lot because the cultural nuances and everything that comes with that, it's so important because often something that is normal for us can be offended for others. And speaking of the world that we're living in, like we're basically living in an AI world already, in which AI tools can critique our speech or write our speech, or even deepfake can deliver my speech right now. Fast forward 5 years from now, what's left for the human speaker? What's one thing Ioana can teach that AI will never be able to replicate?
Right. My prediction, my bid is that speaking is going to become more high tech and more high touch. So, more high tech on the one hand, for online events, hybrid events, even on site where people are going to see all sorts of visual effects and apps and all of these things. And their expectations from speakers are going to be that they can give them a real experience. They can make them feel something in real time. And that requires speakers to have a really great ability to manage themselves in the moment and to connect and not just establish that connection, but respond in real time to whatever's happening for the people in front of them. So, those skills, being present, being attuned to the people in the room, and being adaptable in real time, I think are the three skills that speakers need to really double down on in the coming years. Formats, if we look at formats, that's going to be everything that AI cannot script, right? Conversations like this one, panels, firesides, workshops where activities and interactive situations need to be set up and managed. I was talking just yesterday about those video games that are choose your own ending. So I think something like that will happen in the speaking world where the audience is going to be more actively involved and speakers will have to level up on their facilitation skills to be able to guide and to to steer those experiences. So that's where I believe that the speaking world is going. We'll see what comes of this. But if you're counting on AI to write your speeches, you're out of the game. So uh, careful with that one. It's a great tool. I will say, I think an AI speechwriter gives a lot more people a bit more polish and structure than they would have gotten on their own. But this really concerns entry level speakers. If you're looking to build authority through speaking, you really need to be above that. So, presence is the key word.
Yeah, I agree because a short scenario, like imagine you're creating, let's say, to improve your speaking, you're creating content online and you're putting your AI to create a script, you're reading from a prompter, you maybe prepare a bit before that. But if you don't start doing it yourself from scratch, like actually putting your ideas down on paper, refining those ideas, creating some structure yourself, and so on, you end up in a position in which you are invited in a podcast on stage or in some sort of public situation in which you are not able to share those ideas across because at the end of the day, they are not yours.
Yeah, that's one thing. And the audience feels cheated. What's valuable, what's magical about speaking is knowing that a person that lives and breathes has put their time and energy into preparing for this moment that we share. If they don't do that, then we feel really cheated. I mean, they might as well just have emailed that speech that's written by an AI, right? Why didn't they just email us the speech? Think about it this way: you're writing a birthday card for your best friend and they open it and they read it and they absolutely love it. And then they say, "Yeah, actually I wrote it with my AI assistant." I just have a pit in my stomach just thinking about being in that situation. I would hate it. So, if you wouldn't do that for your best friend's birthday card, why would you do it for an audience that has paid money, most likely, to be in that room? They haven't paid money to hear you recite or read an AI written speech. And again, I don't want to say never use it. It's an excellent tool. It just shouldn't do your work for you.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
couldn't agree more. And you and I can talk forever about these topics with you.
So can I,
But I
clearly.
think it's clear we need to do another episode at some point. But to conclude, I would like to ask you a final question for now. It's about the TEDx talks. And when someone is there on stage, what they should not say when they're on stage. Maybe that's the question, but yeah, I try to complicate it.
Okay, so there are all sorts of things that people should say. And they do say them when they're stressed, and it really damages their authority. N- Number one, don't start with anything else except the actual first line of your talk. The thank yous, the hellos, the I'm so happy to be here with you. Drop that, forget about it. It's an easy way for people to get past those first few nervous moments, and I get why they do that, and it feels a little awkward to just start cold, but those first few moments are so precious. Those are the only moments when attention is guaranteed and it's given to us by default, and we really should not waste those. So that's the number one thing people should not say. Like my mate Brian Miller says, you can't begin before you begin. If the first words out of your mouth are, thank you, happy to be here, that means that you think that those are the most important things to put at the beginning of your talk. And they're not. You should never say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Please bear with me. People feel like that's a way to be authentic and vulnerable. And it's fine to be authentic and vulnerable, just not like that. Nobody is there to make you feel better. If you say, oh, please bear with me, I'm a little nervous, you're asking the audience to take care of you. And that's not what they need to be doing. And then, of course, there are the famous ums and ahs that are probably the most hated words in the speaking world. But you know what? Having no ums and ahs makes people sound robotic. So I think we need to take that with a pinch of salt. My personal pet peeve in terms of words that shouldn't be used are these verbal tics, such as like. Do you know what I mean? Right. I hear a lot of people using these words after every other sentence. Are you one?
Oh, yes.
It makes me feel like we're just looking for a way to reassure each other. That's most of the time the role that these words play, and they do damage the person's credibility and their authority. Again, I get it. It's perfectly natural for us to need to do this. The one thing we need to ask ourselves, is this a choiceful word? Again, back to being intentional and showing up in an intentional way. Do I really mean to ask this question, this right at the end of a statement or a question I'm asking? What is the role that this word plays for me? Is this something that I'm saying for myself or for the audience? Who does it serve? The moment we can begin to look at these words from that perspective is the moment that we can begin to clean up our language. And I really recommend everybody try to watch themselves on a recording. And if they have one of these little verbal tics, to just click a pen, one of these clicky pens, take a
Yes.
clicky pen and click a pen every time you hear yourself saying the word. And just notice how often you're doing that. That's like one of the first things that you can do. And imagine that you're clicking a pen, have an imaginary pen in your hand as you're speaking, and slowly you'll begin to catch yourself doing it. And then slowly you'll begin to notice that you're just about to click, and then you can stop yourself before you actually say it.
That's
So as a little exercise, obviously, when you're on stage, you can't actually do the clicking gesture. So you need to practice in let's say in safe situations when you're not in front of a high stakes audience. But the reflex to click will be there, and you'll be able to stop yourself before you actually do it. So yeah, this is a good way to try to clean up.
nice. That's a nice exercise, and it makes so much sense, especially when it comes to like having these cues. Like,
Mhm.
and what I did when I tried to avoid using filler words or things like that, I also transcribe my
Mhm.
recordings or
Also
watching
great.
as well when it comes to podcasts
Yeah.
itself. And there are some tools that literally counts. It helps you remove them, but
Yes.
counts as well, obviously, how many you. And I was shocked to hear that for an
It
episode in which I was the host and I wasn't speaking that much. I have like 90 something ums, and I was like, oh no.
yeah.
But
Yeah, it can be a lot. I learned a lot from editing my own videos, just noticing all the things that I wanted to trim away. It's quite fascinating, yeah.
Yana, thank you so much for being with us today. I learned personally a lot, and I'm sure those listening and watching learn as well. And hopefully they took notes and start applying those because, like just learning something without actually putting into practice, it's not that helpful, but let's hope for that. And thank you again. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And until next one, pura vida.